I'm Julia, and my co-host is Tim, who will be waving at you. First of all, can we say hello to everyone who's joined us and look at your faces? Would you all like to wave and give us a smile? Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming, and we hope you'll enjoy the evening. We shall be recording this event, so do please turn your video off if you don't want to be recorded. In any event, we would prefer it if everyone turns off their videos to help reduce energy usage, because a study I came across showed that turning off the cameras in video calls could reduce carbon emissions by as much as 96%. Could you also ensure you're muted? So this evening's about powering your house, specifically about photovoltaics, PV, and battery storage of power. Renewable energy such as wind, solar, and hydro isn't produced at a constant rate. So if we're to rely on it in the future, storage is crucial for supply. The home batteries you'll see this evening are likely in the future for many homes, and I'm sure will be encouraged by UK power networks as they try to balance the grid supply and demand. And in fact, they're offering a free fuse box upgrade if it's needed, with installation of solar power and electric vehicle chargers. No doubt there will also be large commercial banks of batteries or other storage, such as hydrogen as well. Just to start, I thought I'd share this link, which I'm hoping I can do, I haven't updated it. Anyway, it was at 4:30 today. But I just think this is great, this grid watch. Just seeing how much we use in the UK and where it's coming from. And I've watched it change and the renewables percentage, become higher. I mean, the total demand is the red box on the top left. And then how it's made up, you can see all the various gases by far the CGT is by far the biggest supplier of power. So we've got 4 local people this evening talking. Jill, me, Nick, and Gay. And you'll probably have seen different aspects of some of these houses if you came to previous events. We also have Jason from Ohm Energy in Eastbourne, who I'm hoping can answer the questions the rest of us can't. We'll each give a short presentation. If you have questions, please type them in the chat box, as usual. We'll take any immediate questions about the specific presentation straight after it. But otherwise, we'll ask our householders or Jason to respond after all the speakers have finished. So we'll begin with Jill's house in Lewes. Jill, are you happy to?
Well, I'm Jill. I have an eco house in South Street in Lewes. It's not a grand design place. It's a Victorian terraced cottage, which I've retrofitted to make it low energy. I've had solar panels since 2010, and they've easily paid for themselves through the feed-in tariff and through savings in mains electricity. Then in 2014, I installed a small lithium storage battery system, which allows me to use solar power at night and during a mains electricity outage, which does happen. It tops up from the grid if I run down the batteries a lot outside sunshine hours. The system works seamlessly and automatically. Of course, I wouldn't be able to run my whole house normally on my small system in an outage. It's set up to run my office equipment, the fridge, and a bunch of LED lights for several hours. I certainly wouldn't be able to run thirsty appliances like cookers and vacuum cleaners on it. Here's my system, bolted to the wall in my attic. Solar panel inverter on the left, storage batteries on the right, in a box the size of an airline carry-on bag. It doesn't need regular servicing. If I want to, I can monitor my solar and battery systems remotely on my own computer with graphics showing consumption and battery usage throughout the day. I'm not techie, so I don't really look at it a lot. But the solar input, yellow on the graph, looks small because most of the solar power goes into topping up my batteries. As you can see, the batteries in blue are doing a great job supplying all the power at night for lights and so on. The little spurt of grid power in the morning, which is red on the graph, when the batteries have run down, is probably me boiling a kettle for coffee. Something that I want to underline is that in households that are already low energy, storage batteries are probably not going to pay for themselves. Just bear that in mind. They could, they might. Mine cost £4,200 in 2014 from a small company, though prices have come down a lot. I did it because it was the next saving the planet step after solar panels, and I liked the idea of being an early adopter and a beacon for others to learn from. I used a windfall, a legacy from my mother, to do something that just felt the right thing to do. It's hard to tell how much mains electricity I've saved by installing storage batteries, particularly as at the time I'd also been switching all my lighting to LED with massive savings, as you can imagine. I use perhaps £60 of mains electricity a year, excluding the standing charge. So more than half my electricity bill is now the standing charge. I'm with a green energy supplier, so my electricity may be more expensive than some cheap deals, but as I use hardly any. So some quick advice if you're thinking of investing in a battery storage system. Analyze your electricity use. When are your peak times for using electricity each day? And can you install more energy efficient appliances or LED lighting? Check that the system you buy will continue to work during a power cut. They don't all. Use a reputable supplier. There are cold callers offering quick sign deals that may not be appropriate for you. Ask around for advice. Try Transition Town Lewes as a start. There are new technologies emerging. Lithium and cobalt are not ideal materials in terms of where they're mined, the Congo, Chile, and so on. So here's the techie stuff in case anyone wants to screenshot it. In Germany, where there's a lot of solar power, the government sometimes actually subsidizes householders for installing battery systems because it helps to take the storage strain off the grid on sunny days. So let's hope that happens here. I've known for ages that electricity storage systems are key to future development of renewable power. They're an unglamorous subject, unlike solar and wind, but they're the bedrock of any generation project. We can help the bigger picture by storing our own electricity. Thank you.
That's lovely, Jill. Thank you. Excellent. Has anybody got any immediate questions? No. Has anybody got anything they want to say to Jill?
I was going to ask, how many people did you talk to before you settled on the supplier that you used in the end?
Interestingly, in the end, I only talked to one. This is for the storage batteries. His website was so clear, so sensible, so educated and interesting that I thought this guy really knows about it. And I had generally asked around, and his quote was good. He was a small company. In fact, he's no longer operating, but it was a bit rash to do that. But I got good value in the end. And I mentioned that it doesn't really need servicing, but I'm using Sunstore in Worthing for the occasional time when it needs a look at. Someone's asked about the new materials post lithium and cobalt. Interesting. This is probably one for Nick.
Yeah, can we leave this till later in the presentation as a more general question? I mean, later in the session, and I'll keep it as a question we'll ask. Yeah. Okay. So this is my house, which I bought in 2013. It was a rectangular shoebox shaped bungalow in very poor condition with a tacky extension. but I liked it because it faced south. It had a lovely old vine at the front, big double glazed windows, and the main building was of good cavity brick construction. I took down the extension and built another one, so it's now L-shaped. You can see on the plan where the new build is. I wanted to have a pitched roof, but my neighbours were not happy about the increased height, so it stayed flat roofed. The roof was in a very bad state, so it was upgraded and insulated. I've had photovoltaic panels, PV, in a previous house, and knowing they work well, I wanted to have them here too. There are two ways to fix PV panels with a flat roof: either fasten them to the structure or weigh them down. I decided not to fix them to the structure because that meant bolts through the roof and a leak potential. So I went for the weight option. The wind factor meant a lot of weights, and a structural engineer calculation showed I had to have the roof strengthened. So the beams in the house had to be doubled up, which meant a bit of a mess, but the builders did a good job with me still living in the house. And that's the beams and the panels just being slotted onto their base. I had them installed in December 2015, and they cost about £6,000, including some associated electrical work. It was more expensive than it need have been because it was a rush to get in before feed-in tariff rates dropped right down, and the panels were in a short supply at that time, and I could only get some rather good-looking but expensive ones. The feed-in tariff and electricity savings will pay back the cost of installation in time, probably over about 12 years. I put in 10 panels, 3 kilowatt hours. Is it kilowatt hours or just 3 kilowatts, do I say? Not sure. Though there was space for more. It works particularly well for me because I'm at home most of the day, and I try and use electrical equipment like washing, hoovering and cooking during the daytime. And I can monitor what's going on in real time via a website in China, no less. I had been thinking about a battery for a few years, but they were so expensive and I felt I couldn't justify the cost being a low electricity user. But in November 2019, I took advantage of a half price deal from a company called Moixa. I didn't need a big battery because I just wanted to store the power produced by my PV panels during the day for my background electricity and evening lights, rather like Jill has done. It's a very neat box, basically two very heavy batteries, which are from China, though all the technology and operating stuff is British. It's a British company. So the scheme I signed up with the Moixa is called Grid Share. I'm basically a supplier to the grid to even out the peaks and troughs that the grid finds so hard to deal with. So the power network, if needs be, can directly use the power in my battery at peak morning and evening times when there is a surge. I get paid for the power they use at the same rate I buy electricity. In return, my battery is guaranteed for as long as I'm signed up to the scheme. Right, here's, looks like lots of stuff. Just about the fan. The fan in my battery is a bit noisy. I would have put it somewhere else if I could, like a garage or roof space if I had one. But it's not too bad. I'm used to it, and I've put a cover over the box now. But I love the interface online. You can see exactly what's going on wherever I am from my phone and wherever I am in the world, if I was somewhere else in the world. It's also quite interesting hearing the fan kick in on a cold winter's evening as the national grid draws on my battery to help power other people who are cooking their supper. As to payback, I don't think I will be able to recoup the cost for many years at my low level of consumption. It might make financial sense with a bigger consumption, or if electricity prices go up a lot, which they may well do. Who knows? So it may be, anyway, I did it for reasons similar to Jill, that it's the next step in trying to make my house a little bit more environmentally friendly. So I would just like at the end to say that photovoltaics, PV and batteries, they're not for everybody. And the kit is expensive, no doubt. Much cheaper and very effective as some of the things listed on this slide. In my previous house, just awareness of what we were using with the energy monitor, plus changing all my light bulbs to energy efficient ones, cut our electricity bill by 1/3. So simple can be effective. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that, Julia. You've got a question here. Are your batteries lithium?
Yes. Yeah. I think they're all lithium now. I mean, aren't they, Nick?
Yeah, they're lithium, but they're lithium iron phosphate. There's no cobalt in them. And they also are fairly proof against fire. The ones with cobalt, like my Tesla one, are possibly capable of catching fire, but because they have a non-aqueous electrolyte in them that burns, whereas your ones, the Moixa ones, won't.
Oh, so is there a downside to the fact that I've got one?
They're bigger for a given size.
Okay.
And they're a touch less efficient. You get slightly less energy. When with a battery, you always get less out than you put in. There's always a loss, a round trip loss. And lithium iron phosphate ones are slightly more lossy than the ones like my Tesla ones. Right. This is our house, one of a semi-detached bare, mid-Victorian, and originally 2 up and 2 down. A single-storey lean-to was added at the back in Victorian times and now houses a kitchen and utility room. The extension you can see to the right, with a bedroom and a bathroom upstairs and a garage downstairs, was added in 1990. Next one, please. We have 2 separate photovoltaic systems, each with an inverter to change the DC from the panels to AC. The smaller 2.7 kilowatt system was put in 17 years ago, and the larger 2.12 kilowatt system was put in over 10 years ago. There are meters to measure the generation so as to collect the feed-in tariff. Those are the actual readings today you can see on the meters, a total of over 100,000 kilowatt hours since installation. The Tesla battery is connected to the main AC household system, and therefore to store DC from the panels has to convert the AC back to DC. This was a requirement for being able to collect the feed-in tariff. Now there is no feed-in tariff. Batteries are available for new systems that more efficiently take in the DC directly from the panels. If you want to use your battery to power the house when the grid fails, it is a safety requirement that you do not feed electricity out onto the broken grid. With the Tesla system, this needs that you fit a separate gateway. If the grid does fail and the system switches over to the battery, there's a very short glitch. There's just enough to crash our computers, and therefore a small uninterruptible power supply was added to cover these glitches. Next slide, please. These are the 2 photovoltaic systems, each with inverters to convert the DC to AC. Both use heterojunction cell panels, and at 180 watts and 240 volts, they were the most efficient panels available at the time. But you can now get 375 watt panels in the same size. The first system was installed before the feed-in tariff scheme began and qualified for a 50% installation grant, but also got a grandfathered feed-in rate, tariff rates when the scheme started, and this is now at 12.08 pence per kilowatt hour. The second system was installed when the feed-in rate was at its highest and now pays 48.29 pence per kilowatt hour generated. In addition, we get an actual metered export tariff of 3.9 pence per kilowatt hour, rather than the more common deemed export tariff of 50% of the generation. These together more than cover our electricity bill, so that as we have no other purchased energy, this means that we have a negative net fuel bills for the house and the electric car, the car being charged entirely at home. Next slide, please. This is me turning on the battery system for the first time. It stores 13.5 kilowatt hours of energy and could store at a rate of 3.8 kilowatts, not quite enough for the PV systems when they're at their rare flat out rate. And they can supply electricity at 5 kilowatts, enough for household loads most of the time. In winter, the main use of the store is to store cheap off-peak electricity during the night to replace daytime peak electricity. With the installation of the gateway, it can provide backup during grid failure, which seems common in this locality. It is connected so that it powers up everything but the heat pump and the car charger. Backup has been used 46 times for a total of 13 hours since it was installed. The battery has so far stored 16,300 kilowatt hours of electricity, equivalent to 1,210 full charges, with no apparent loss in the charge capacity or the 88.5 round trip efficiency of AC to AC. The uninterruptible power supply can provide 500 watts for 5 minutes, more than enough to cover the switchover glitches. Last slide, please. This is the total energy use of the house for the car and the car for a year. 40% of the total 14,500 kilowatt hours comes from the sun, with 31% coming directly and the rest via the battery. And that's it. Thank you.
Wow. Thanks, Nick. You're very lucky having those massive feed-in tariff payments.
Indeed so. I feel guilty about them sometimes, but not guilty enough not to take them.
Yeah, they are incredibly generous. Yeah, I mean, when my first set of solar panels in my previous house, I got the grant because it was before the feed-in tariff, and but mind you, they cost 15,000 then panels.
Mine was 20,000.
Yeah, they were.
But I got half paid by the government.
Yes, that's right. There was quite a generous sort of. What was I going to ask you? Oh, yes, the one thing I don't know if people are aware of, the size of the battery doesn't necessarily mean it will power everything in your house, because it has what is the technical word? A discharge rate, and then
there's an energy rate in kilowatt hours and a power rate in kilowatts.
Yeah. So for example, mine is much less than yours. I think you said yours was 3 kilowatts and 5 kilowatts, and mine's something like 3 kilowatts and 2 kilowatts. So if I use the electric shower, I mean, there's no way the battery can cope with that. So it has to draw, electricity is drawn from the grid, because the battery can only give out whatever it is, 2.5, I don't know, or 3 kilowatt.
Yeah. I see there's a question there about the heat pump. Yes, it all runs a heat pump as well. And someone says they thought they were limited to 4 kilowatts. In the early day, there was a limit that you can put on what is called, was then G89, of 15 amps per phase, which would put a limit of 4 kilowatts on them. But in the early days, the DNO, the distribution network operator, they still have the freedom to accept more if they're happy it doesn't overload. In the early days, when there weren't many people around with panels, they were quite happy to let you put in more panels than that. So I applied and they said yes. nowadays they're much more strict with that, and you would have to go to well, they would expect you to put in 3-phase if you went much more than that, which is fine for some industrial places, but not many homes want 3-phase electricity.
Okay, thanks, Nick. We'll move on to Gay, and then we can come back to some of the other questions. I've been making a note of what Gay has got a very different system. It's massive. Anyway, I'll let Gay explain what she can about it.
Thank you. Yeah, lovely having to follow Nick with all his well thought out understanding. Yeah, we live outside Lewes. We actually live in Rodmell, and we bought in 2008 a house that was originally a barn and then had been converted in the 1920s with an extension. And actually there's an annex in the house too. So it's a big property, lots of windows, lots of roof. Yeah, and old. So, you know, a house that kind of we wanted, you know, I don't think we really thought about what it would mean to make it more eco-friendly when we bought it. However, that became our focus quite quickly. Do you want to move to the next slide, Nick, Tim? So that's the back of the house, and you can see that it's a large house and it has lots of windows. Actually, the first thing we did when we moved in was double glaze the windows and reseal all the windows. And that was a good thing. That certainly helped. And then over the following years, we looked at several things. I particularly remember us costing wood pellet, heating with wood pellet, and also air source heat pumps. The size of our property didn't help. And Nick, Tim, if you flip to the next slide. And nor did the fact that actually we have quite a modern way of living. We'd opened up space. So while we've made a lovely space to live in, we'd actually given ourselves different challenges. So finally, a year ago, with Jason's help, after actually somebody had a question about fixing the roof, we had a lot of roof to fix too, but we fixed the roof. So it was almost like we did our homework first. But then we decided to install solar panels. Next slide. So lots of long roof and a hell of a lot of solar panels, 28 of them to be precise. Our unused powers can be exported to the grid, but we actually do also, like Nick, have a Tesla battery for storage. So obviously this holds the electricity when we're not, when it's not being used. Do you want to go to the next slide? So there's a quick look at how it all works. It goes from the solar panels, comes into the inverter and DC, which converts it to AC, and then the gateway moves it either downstairs into the storage or to the grid. So if you flick to the next slide.
Or to the house, presumably.
Yes. So there's pieces to this. The first piece of the solar panels. The second pieces are in the loft, and they're the inverters, which convert the energy. And one of the challenges we had, and Jason might want to speak to this, but this is a barn with an annex, and it turns out something that neither Jason or us had actually spotted was going to be important, was that the energy comes in at one end of the house. The electricity comes in at one end of the house. However, our fuse box and everything is at a completely different point in the house. So we were learning as we went, and I'll show you something a bit later that shows you some of that learning. Next slide, Tim. So inside is a Tesla gateway, and I can't see it, but you probably can because I've got people in front of it, but also the monitor. And then on the next slide is the outside power pack or power wall, which stores the energy that we use and is under warranty for 10 years. And if you carry on, Tim. So kind of just a key overview, because you'll notice some of the pictures. One OMHM installed for us. We definitely had disturbance. I mean, obviously we had to put the scaffolding up and put things on the roof, but this little thing that we all discovered together about having one point that we needed to be in touch with at one end of the house and the other point at the other meant that we had to take cabling all along upstairs and back down to where the fuse box was. So I think we all learned from that. It's working very well. I put the cost in there. It was expensive. We're in our first year of it. On a summer's day, in fact, I want to show you something, Tim, that I was meant to put into the presentation, which I'll show you in a sec when we maybe come back to me. I don't know if anybody can see me on the screen, but you can see that I'm showing I'm showing a page from an app. And I'm sure Nick has the same thing, but we have, you have a Tesla app and this monitors what's going on. So we all get very excited when the sun's shining and we see the panels drawing in all this energy. We're nothing to do with the grid and we're just filling up. But we're kind of working this out. And I think it would be fair to say a little bit like Julia, it's going to take a while for this to pay back, our investment, certainly. But I guess that wasn't the main point. The main point was reducing what was going on from our home and doing the best we can. Yeah, so that's basically it.
Lovely. Thank you, Gay. Has anybody got any specific questions about Gays? I'm dying to pick up the last question.
Yeah, I've also got the app, but one of the annoying things on it, it doesn't run under Windows. It runs under Android Apple. And Apple.
That's true.
So if you want to put it on your PC, you have to run a Android simulator and run it under that. But it is very pretty.
Yeah. Well, my Moixa one is quite a good app too. You know, it has little. You can actually see the stuff moving around. They have a kind of moving, you know, with the stuff coming in from the solar panels and going into the house, feeding, you know, my appliances and then going off to the grid. It's yeah.
I mean, it's good to watch, and like I think somebody else said, you know, several people said, you know, we moved to a renewable energy provider too, and we're kind of watching how this all works and learning.
Yeah, exactly. Right, can I just, I mean, I'll come to you, Jason, shortly, but I just want to pick up, and somebody else may want to comment on the last one, because Susan Hill said, in the absence of a storage battery, is it possible to use a PV power to power the battery of an electric car? Well, there is a move to make, as I understand it, electric cars become little batteries for our houses, because it can be used. So you can get the power from your solar PV panels. I mean, you need the right equipment and I think an inverter and things, but it can go straight into your car, and then your car battery can actually can work as a battery for the house. Isn't that correct? So there's an idea that if everybody has electric cars, then that will also help with this whole problem the grid has of evening out the usage.
At the moment, only Nissan Leafs have the capacity to take the power out again.
Oh, right.
The vast majority of electric cars that have Type 2 connectors cannot possibly work in both directions. So, yes, sometimes the use of bidirectional connectors on cars will increase, but at the moment, apart from the Nissan Leaf, the new Nissan Leaf, it's only the one in the last couple of years that have done it, can actually go bidirectionally.
Yeah, but I can see, you know, it could be if everybody is going to be having electric cars, it's going to be such an important way of storing power. And I also remember during the electric car show, people always saying, oh, what happens to the batteries when the cars, you know, when they're no good for the cars? Well, in fact, a lot of these batteries can then be used for storage in buildings. And there are places where there are several buildings around this country which are actually powered by vehicle batteries.
Yeah. The question, can you use it, charge your car without a battery? Yes, is the answer. The car charge is just like any other load, and it always takes, because you've connected inside of your meter, your loads always take precedence over export to the grid. So if you're generating enough of your panels to fire them, the car up, then yes, it will. You will be using your panels to charge your car without having to have a battery.
Right.
What you won't be able to do is charge your car at night off the panels. That does need a battery.
Right. This I think this is one maybe we can bring Jason in here, about the current costs of installing some of this equipment. Somebody's said, you know, the current prices, you know, without any government feed-in tariff add-ons or help, how long will it take to repay installment costs? So maybe Jason, you'd just like to talk about the current costs and things.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Yeah. Firstly, I'd like to offer Nick a job. 30 grand a year, more or less. But yeah, no, good knowledge from Nick. Really good. Cost-wise, yeah, if I'm honest, as far as battery technology goes, it's kind of gone the wrong way in recent, well, in the last sort of 6 months, especially on the Tesla side. We saw a price rise of about £600-700 in the last quarter, partly because of their production capacity and Brexit, COVID, etc., etc. So an average installed Tesla nowadays, funny enough, is about £9,000 installed, which is more than you guys, you know, than you paid some time ago. So just to put that into context, although it's worth bearing in mind the points that Nick made on capacity, because there's a reason why the Tesla is 13.5 kilowatts. There's a reason why the deliverable load is 5 kilowatts, because that's usable and useful as far as delivery goes. So the Tesla, if you compare it against the other manufacturers, is in fact pounds by pounds, you know, comparable and often cheaper than the smaller battery manufacturers. They are ahead of the game, partly in software and partly in technology. Lithium is still the go-to. Someone asked earlier about the alternatives. Lithium, as I say, is still the go-to. There are products like graphene and zinc manganese and sulfur-based, and it's all about energy density. So how much energy you can store in these batteries. But at the moment, lithium is still the go-to. So, as I say, as far as price-wise, Tesla-wise, that's kind of what you're looking at. Solar PV has seen a drastic reduction in price. I've been installing solar PV for around 15-16 years. I was installing it prior to any feed-in tariffs, etc. And I would say nowadays, if you guys are installing a domestic system, you should be looking at somewhere around £1,200 a kilowatt. Obviously, commercially, or the larger a system you have, the more that decreases, because fundamentally the main components are the inverter. That's kind of the most expensive part of things. So yeah, I would keep that in mind. Obviously, there are other factors like scaffold access. As Gay mentioned, the distance between your fuse board, your fuse head, the current condition of your actual electrics as they are. They're all factors as well. But if you're in the £1,200 to £1,500 per kilowatt, then you're probably in the right sort of ballpark. Hopefully that's helpful. As Gay mentioned, that installation, I partly remember, and I think it was longer than a year, but maybe I'm wrong.
It's almost to a week or two out.
Was it? Okay, cool. Time flies. Well, or it doesn't fly. So the things to learn, as I say, from Gay's situation is, it is difficult, especially in older houses and houses that have been added to, because when you're in a backup situation, the really important things to consider are the distance between the fuse head, which is where the electric comes in and where the meter is, and the fuse board itself, because the gateway and the battery need to be within certain distances of each other. Second thing to consider is the backup facility. So what do you want to back up? That requires some reconfiguring of people's electrics. So do you want your fridge to work, your TV to work, your sockets to work? That all needs to be put onto a dedicated board. Now, many houses, especially the older houses, aren't set up in this way. So if you are considering these things in the future, my advice would be, if you're upgrading a fuse board, then potentially you could actually set yourself up for a battery or for solar in the future and not add to the cost. So again, it's all about future proofing. If you're installing solar, future proof for a battery. If I'm totally honest, now is not the time to install a battery, in my opinion. And I'd gladly sell you one, I'd gladly install one, but they will get cheaper. There will potentially be more subsidy. So perhaps wait, but if you do install solar, then at least make provision for a battery, because pretty much all of us will end up with one. We're all being sort of steered towards the electrification of the grid. So whether that be heat pumps, electric vehicles, etc., we are going to be very, very reliant on electricity. So let's just future-proof for all those additions that we're bound to make in the future. And then, the heartbreaking thing for me is turning up to a job and having to undo something that someone's recently done or already done. So again, any advice that anyone wants on that, I'm there to sort of lend a hand, and don't expect anything for that. But hopefully that covers the points. Just a real quick one. I made a quick note of Nick mentioned about, and someone else mentioned about the limit to the grid, about 4 kilowatts. We were limited by the DNO, if you like, at 3.69 kilowatts per phase. So on a single phase system, we would have to limit things. On a 3-phase system, obviously, we could spread that across the 3 phases. The export limitation and batteries have changed that. And also someone else mentioned zappies, which again are really important when it comes to vehicle charging. It's all about the monitoring and control of things now. So if you're producing electricity locally, it's really, really important that it's used either in your battery, in your vehicle, or whatever. If you're not installing a battery, my advice would be look at something called a solar iBoost or an ImmerSun. If you've got a hot water cylinder, so we can heat your hot water up for free with the additional or extra solar energy. They're about £250. There's no maintenance. And a lot of the time, you don't need a battery. I have free hot water from May through to September, October with my solar iBoost. I have no battery at the moment, but I utilize all of my solar through the summer months, and my heat pump doesn't come on at all for about 6 months of the year. So yeah, drawing back to the grid side of things, if you do want to install more, as Gay did, and there was something in the picture that was an export limiter. So basically the grid or the DNO may come back to you and say, okay, you want to install 7 or 8 kilowatts. That's fine, but we can only accept 3 or 4 kilowatts. So we put a device in line which prevents anything more than that limit going back to the grid to protect the grid. Now, the grid is not designed to deal with EV, PV, batteries. It just isn't. So that's something that's very much mainstream now and quite easy to fit. So we don't need to be limited to the 3 or 4 kilowatt scenario. My advice would be, if you're looking to fill part of your roof, then probably go as far as you can at that point in time, because economies of scale, access, etc., you are best served getting as much as you can in there. Obviously based on your usage, etc., etc. Anyway, I will stop talking.
Lovely, thank you. I'm glad you mentioned about what to do with your excess PV, with your excess electricity, because most of mine goes back down to the grid, but and I'm thinking maybe I should get some kind of solar immersion heater, because it seems such a waste. And as you say, it's best used locally, isn't it? Because it like most of these things, it tends to sort of dissipate the further it goes away, doesn't it? I mean, I'm not technical, but that's kind of how I view it anyway.
No, dissipate's a good word, one of my favourites. And no, you're totally right though, because any modern city, any smart city that's being built nowadays is all about local generation and using it immediately. Our grid was built in the 1950s, and not for this scenario. It's not capable of achieving what we're all hoping to achieve. So it will be about microgrids. It will be about using what we generate locally. So yeah, absolutely bang on.
Well, that's where electric cars come into the whole thing quite neatly, don't they?
Yeah, it'll be a blend. Yeah.
All right. Well, somebody's asking about wind turbines. Can I just park that one for the moment? Can I just go back to some of the very early questions? Somebody asked about roof repairs. I believe you can just take the panels off, can't you? But then where do you put them? I mean, surely you've got all the electric cables, and you need to get an electrician in, wouldn't you, to take them off?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't advise anyone to go and do it themselves necessarily. I mean, DC electricity, if you disconnect a panel, it will be live in the sunlight. There will be DC electricity there. So really and truly, yeah, you should use someone that's qualified and understands how that works and what that's about.
Mm-hmm. But it's doable. I mean, it's not too complicated a job.
It's not too complicated. And the back of the panels have MC4 connectors, which are generally quite safe, a male and female connection. They're a bit difficult to get undone, and we do have specialist tools to disconnect them and replacements if they're damaged. So I wouldn't recommend someone does that just in case they hurt themselves.
Probably best to get your roof repaired before you put your panels on, isn't it?
One of those.
Oh, that's
it. That's another £1,000 a year.
Yeah. There's one point about the voltage on the roof. If you fit the solar age system with the optimizers, one of the advantages is that it does cut the voltage on each panel, but they're quite expensive. We've got some on our school systems, but not many domestic people have them unless you've got a problem with shadowing. The other question, you mentioned about lithium batteries. Are they the only answer? The reason why they're the only answer is an awkward, sort of irrelevant thing for houses in some way. Cars must have very high density batteries. The only thing even remotely usable on a car is one of the varieties of lithium batteries. And because they're built in huge numbers, they are reasonably cheap. From the sheer technology point of view, things like sodium-ion batteries could provide you cheaper batteries, more reliable, but they would be bigger and way more for a given size. And the reason they're not being built is because they're building lithium batteries in huge numbers in gigafactories to go in cars, and it's liable to stay that way because cars are still a very large portion of the total battery usage. Yeah, if you read all the technical literature, there's all sorts of alternatives to lithium-ion batteries, but the sheer momentum of the huge gigafactories being built to build lithium batteries for cars is going to stop them ever getting in unless the government steps in and subsidises something else than lithium.
Let's be honest. I mean, it's an emerging and developing market. I said to someone earlier, I've been doing this for about 16 years, and the acceleration in things in the last 2 years supersedes the previous 14 years. So I don't think necessarily any of us know where battery technology is leading, but I think it's going to accelerate hugely.
I mean, Tesla are now producing batteries for use in their cars at $100 per kilowatt hour. You can see that obviously the domestic ones are vastly more than that, but there's not much is going to displace them while they push the price down that low.
Somebody asked about whether they could put solar panels in their garden. There's absolutely no reason why not. The only trouble is footballs and people, you could
even get feed-in tariff for them in the garden when there was a feed-in tariff. But yes, and certainly on any outhouses, old garages, stables, anything like that.
Yeah, just keep in mind anything on the ground requires planning. On the roof is far easier, whether it be an outbuilding or your house. There are various people out there advising that you can avoid planning by having something that's removable. But if we install anything anyway, one of the planning constraints is that it needs to be removable. So I don't buy that line of salesmanship, if you like. So if you're going to put it on.
You can get 4 panels outside on permitted development, but that's about it. 2 meters by 2 meters.
Which is not really worth.
Yeah.
Well, if you only want it for powering something outside, if you've got a gardening shed at the bottom.
Fountain.
Yeah.
I was thinking fountain.
I just wanted to bring up the point about power cuts, which came up earlier in the conversation. And that's easily dealable with, isn't it? That you can fit bits and pieces, and don't get into all the technical stuff, but you can fit things so that it can take over in a power cut. Is that correct? Can you just say
some systems, yes.
All right.
Others, no. I say, if you just have a Tesla Powerwall, no, you can't. You have to fit the gateway.
Yeah,
Your system has a gateway built into it, but lots of other ones don't. Yeah. If you want to be able to use it in a power cut, you need to inquire carefully about the system you're getting.
But okay, Jill, sorry, you wanted to say something.
No, just simply, some people don't realise that, and you do need to ask. Some systems do. Mine does. I've seen it. I've got a little emergency light up on the wall, and a couple of times I've just seen it come on and thought, right, okay, and there's been a glitch, and I should be able to run my, as I said, my just office equipment, LED lights, and the fridge. That's what I put on my system because I've got a small one for several hours. And so it is a matter of asking. And if they dodge and weave, persist, because it can be done. It's easy. Mine was straightforward. I didn't even have to ask for it. It's a Victron system. They just included it. It's to do, Nick can talk about this. It's to do with islanding.
Oh no! Let's not get too technical, please. Not
right.
No.
Yes.
Please,
okay. Okay. So I'm a non-technical person, as you know, and I gather that for safety reasons, it was originally that if there's a power cut, your solar panels won't work.
Yeah. The reason is that you mustn't electrocute people working to repair the lines outside.
Yeah.
If the lines break down, and a worker comes out and tests it and finds it dead and starts to repair it, and at some point someone starts feeding power out from their wind turbine or panels onto it, you could kill someone. So there is a very strict set of rules as to how much you must isolate. It's not just a simple relay. There are all sorts of rules as how soon it has to drop out, when it can come back. And it has to be independently tested and certified. So it's quite an expensive
The short
thing.
answer is yes. There are systems, perfectly ordinary, simple systems that will carry on in a power cut.
So, I never even asked about for mine. I have no idea if it can. I have no idea. I never thought to ask because I've never had a power cut here. So
if you connect your battery this side of the fuse, and there's no other box to isolate it, then no, it won't.
No, I'm going to ask them anyway. Great. Right. There was a question about people who might lend money, and Tim mentioned that he got a loan from Parity Trust. Is that not right, Tim?
Yeah, and that's link will be on the sheet. We prepared a sheet to take away with lots of links on. So that will be on the sheet, which will be on the website, I think, to download.
Okay.
But yeah, Parity Trust gave me a good deal, and I used it to buy my solar panels, and paid it off. But I was lucky enough to get the feed-in tariff, so
Right.
I could pay it off through that.
There was a question about wind turbines, but I think it was more about planning consent, wasn't it, or something? Yeah.
There is permitted development on wind turbines, but it's so small that you'll probably not be worth doing. You've got to be so many meters from the fence. You've got to be so many meters up, not too high. I was considering actually building my own one to power my sewage system. It might just do it, but you won't get much power from any wind turbine that gets by under the permitted development and doesn't need planning.
No, they're not terribly efficient, the little ones, are they? No, need a large one.
They are if you hold them up high enough. Well, that's the point. You need to be about 4 or 5 turbine diameters higher than any intercepting bit of stuff within about 10 diameters from the turbine. Right. So if you have got a nice flat field and you poke it up on a tall pole in the middle, small ones can work quite well. But a little bit of eddy currents, a little bit of turbulence around them can play havoc with the output from a wind turbine.
Okay, we're just about on 7 o'clock. I don't know if there are any other questions or things. I mean, I'm happy to stay online for another quarter of an hour if anybody wants to carry on, but I'd just like to say a couple of things before we finish. First of all, thank you to Jill, Nick, Gay, and Jason for talking about their installations and what they've been doing. We've had 3 events now. The recordings of our previous events can be found on our Transition Town Lewes website. I will put the link up in a minute. And today's will be on the web page as well very soon. At some stage, I'd like to have 2 further sessions about materials and outside things. But for now, I've got an electric car show planned for April 15th, an electric bike show planned for April the 22nd. So do sign up for the Transition Town Lewes newsletter for information on those as and when we get it all set up. If you've got any more questions, do email us at inquiries@Transition Town Lewes, and we'll pass them on to whoever we think can best answer your question. And as Tim said, we'll also have a follow-up sheet of information available on our website and in our newsletter after this series of online talks finishes. There's also lots of information from our previous Eco Open House events when we were actually allowed to visit people's houses. I'll put the link in the chat box in a minute. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a lovely evening. And I'll be here for another 10 minutes.
There was a question from someone who said they're about to update their consumer unit.
Oh, okay.
And
yep.
I missed that.
What should they think about?
Well, if you're thinking at some time in the future of adding in solar panels, you want some extra places in there. If you leave some spare places for circuit breakers and possibly RCDs, that will mean you don't have to do too much, and you can isolate it and connect it without having too much problems, which you would have to.
The answer is get a bigger one rather than a smaller one.
Yeah.
I've nearly used all mine up now.
Yeah, they also have to be metal these days. The old plastic ones don't meet the wiring regulations anymore.
They
there is
do, and sorry, just to say, regulation. I think I'm not sure it's 20 or 25% capacity they need to put on a new board for additions. But good practice if you're installing solar is to install a sub board anyway. So even if you've got a new board, good practice dictates that you should add a sub distribution board, which can be interpreted. But the advice would be if you're fitting new boards, as Nick alluded to, I mean, yeah, it should be metal, but those guys would know that. Spare capacity, definitely. Your solar installer might install a sub board anyway. But if you're thinking about a battery as well, then maybe consider what circuits you might want to include in an off-grid situation, because that will save a little bit of work down the line.
Yeah, if you want to split, so your battery only powers certain things, you can't have them all together in the same distribution board.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone else asked for Jason's contact details. That will be in the sheet that we send out, but it's ohmenergy.co.uk, as in OHM energy.co.uk.
Right. Okay.
Thanks, Tim. Well, thanks, guys. Unless you need me, I'll leave you alone.
Thanks very much, Jason.
Oh, thanks very much for coming, Jason. Okay.
Nice to see you again, guys.
Right.
All right, good to see you.
If there's anybody else still on the call who has, is Mike Croker still on the call by any chance? Are you there?
I am indeed.
Okay, you just seemed very knowledgeable and like you've done lots of stuff. Are you local?
Bramber.
Oh right. Oh okay. Are you part of the Stenning?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Same as Dave Tester who's also on the call, I think, or was.
Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking, it's quite nice for us to use Lewes people for these kind of events, but it might be nice to, put in some different, different houses if we do it when we do it again. Not if we do it again, when we do it again.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
Yeah. So I will probably send an email out and you can perhaps respond to that and give me your details if you're interested in taking part.
And maybe Jason has got some of clients of his that will be happy to put themselves forward. Yeah, that would be good. And Daniel will probably have some clients as well. Daniel Holloway on the heat pumps.
Really encourage that, because if I'm honest, the way I've built my business over the last 10 years has been exactly that. I take people along to clients' houses that have got PV, batteries, heat pumps, thermal, and let them talk about it and run with it, and it works really well. And I've got some quite willing customers that have had these things for quite some time, so I'm definitely open to that. If it helps.
I do think it's just, I mean, the reason we do these is because I do feel people like to hear from real people and not from the salesman, and same with the electric cars as well. It's.
I see that Anne Link I don't know if she's still here, is asking about transparent panels.
Yes, I was investigating those the other day. They're really interesting.
Yes, I did.
Well, there are panels that are slightly transparent, but you have to realise that any light that goes through a panel is not converted into electricity.
Obviously.
Yeah. I mean, there's two ways. There are cells that are themselves transparent, but there are also panels where non-transparent cells are spaced out with a given amount of space around them, so the light goes around them, and that can do it. There's a Z-bed or somewhere, there's a housing development that was put up long ago up in South London, and they have these panels along the side there where the cells are spaced out, so they still let a little bit of light get through. But yes, obviously there is a cost. any light that gets through isn't converted to electricity.
We've got one very interesting question here. Well, I think it's very interesting. It's very. I don't know if you're still on the call, Theone. You said you all had very fancy systems for looking at generation and use. I don't even have a hot smart meter yet. Anyone got any advice on best way to look at your usage? Are smart meters all different? Yeah, they are different.
Yeah, there are plenty of cheap monitors around. This is one from Effigy that you clamp those on and has a little box. If all you want is a reasonable estimate of how much you're using and when, there are some quite cheap little Owl make them, Newton make them. £200 or £300 will buy you a little box that will transmit your power to
you can have one. You can have one for free from me, because I've got two sitting in a drawer here which I don't use anymore, because all my I monitor everything online. But I used to, like I said, in my previous house, I cut my electricity bill, slashed it by getting the whole family to watch this monitor, and it was just a simple one, like Nick says. You clip it round the
meter tails
just below the fuse box, and
guys, just to jump in,
it's
if
brilliant.
I can, sorry. Nick was right. The Owl was really good. They were the only guys really doing it. They had the opti plug and everything, which is really useful as well. But one to have a little look at is a company called Smappy, SMAPPE. They offer a really good.
Right, we might just pop that on the list, Tim, if we can.
And if you fit one of these and you've got solar panels, most of the manufacturers do. The base unit won't distinguish between power going in and power going out, but nearly all of the people that make them do a version that allows you to use them with solar panels. And if the person wants to speak very kindly to us at Avesco, I think we've got half a dozen of them around that we've given out at various times.
Yeah, there are spare one. Yeah, Avesco got one. I've got one. So Theone, if you're still on the call, if you want one, email us at Transition Town Lewes and we'll get you one. And then you can start looking at where you're using your energy and
Thanks. I'm still on the call.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Hello, Theone.
Do most people work out what you're using in what places and things like that, literally by having a meter, and then you just go and turn your things on and off and watch the meter?
Yeah, and it goes up and it goes down. Yeah, it's great. It's so much fun, and I got the children involved.
Yeah.
These things are relatively cheap, and what they have is a plug there and a point there. And if you want to know how much an individual device, a kettle, hairdryer or something else uses, you can go through and find which are the heavy users and which you use almost nothing. I think this cost me about £40. I think there's cheaper ones on the market.
Yeah, but as you say, Nick, you got them for free at the office there.
Well, I haven't got these for free.
No, but you've got the old.
We've got the ones that do the whole house by plugging in on the meter tails below the meter. But a lot of people don't realise the difference between things that use an awful lot of electricity, like kettles, and things that use almost nothing, like clocks or such things. And this will tell you. You can tells you how much power you're using, totals up the total power energy consumed over time in kilowatt hours, and if you put in the price of you're paying for your electricity, will tell you how much you spent on that device.
Yeah. The only thing is they don't work if you've got solar panels, but let's not go into all.
This is for each device.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so those do work. But the Owls and the Watsons and the other things, the Effigy things, need to keep the version that does do solar panels.
That's why I've got two spare ones here.
Yeah.
I've got solar panels and they don't work anymore. So, right. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Or shall we all go and say goodbye.
Another bath.
Okay.
I'll see you later.
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
All right, bye for now.